7 Canadians have now been confirmed killed in the Israel-Gaza war, government officials confirmed Thursday. Global Affairs Canada (GAC) said in a statement Wednesday at least 2 Canadians remain missing, in addition to those since the war broke out following an attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7. GAC said Canada unequivocally condemns Hamas' terrorist attack against Israel. We support Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. Canada calls for immediate release of all hostages, and Canada is deeply concerned by the situation in Gaza. GAC said there are currently 5,765 Canadians known to be living in Israel, with another 451 in the West Bank and Gaza and 17,135 in Lebanon. These totals are based on those who have registered with the registration of Canadians abroad, which is a voluntary process. As of Thursday, the department said the government has held more than 1,600 Canadians, permanent residents, their family members, and foreign nationals flee the area by air. Dozens more have left by bus, and more of these transfers are expected in the coming days. GAC said in the statement that the safety of Canadians at home and abroad is our top priority. The updated total of families being supported by the government in connection with deaths came a day after the federal government issued a call for humanitarian pauses on hostilities to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza and for Canadians and other civilians to leave. The Israeli military said its troops and tanks briefly entered northern Gaza overnight into Thursday, hitting several militant targets as a wider ground incursion loomed after more than 2 weeks of war. Israeli airstrikes have devastated parts of the Gaza Strip, leaving neighborhoods in rubble and hospitals struggling to treat masses of wounded with diminishing resources. The United Nations warned it's on verge of running out of fuel in the Gaza Strip, forcing it to sharply curtail relief efforts in the blockaded territory. And the UN Security Council failed again to address the Israeli-Hamas war, rejecting rival resolutions by the United States and Russia. The war in its 20th day now is the deadliest of 5 Gaza wars for both sides. Turkish President Erdogan slammed the European Union on Thursday for failing to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and accused the West of indifference towards the suffering of Muslims. He said, "How many more children must die before the EU Commission calls for a ceasefire? How many more tons of bombs must fall on Gaza before the United Nations Security Council can take action?" Erdogan accused the West of failing to see the violence unfolding in Gaza because the blood being shed is Muslim blood. In his speech, Erdogan said Turkey has so far dispatched 10 plane loads to Egypt carrying humanitarian aid, including generators, destined for Gaza. 25 Turkish medical personnel have also left for Egypt, he said. US President Joe Biden on Wednesday said there is no going back to the status quo in Israel and the region following the deadly attack by Hamas on October 7. When this crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next, Biden said during a news conference at the White House with Prime Minister of Australia. He said, "In our view, there has to be a two-state solution." Biden again said that he believed Israelis had the right and the responsibility to respond to the attack. The anger, the hurt, the sense of outrage that the Israeli people are feeling following the attack is completely understandable. But he also decreed the attacks on Palestinians by Israeli settlers in the West Bank and said it must stop and stop now, and he said he remained focused on humanitarian aid into Gaza. He also said that progress towards regional integration could be one of the reasons behind the attack. Let's listen to what he said.
The Palestinians equally deserve to live side by side in safety, dignity, and peace. There's no going back to the status quo as it stood on October the 6th. That means ensuring Hamas can no longer terrorize Israel and use Palestinian civilians as human shields. I'm convinced one of the reasons Hamas attacked when they did, and I have no proof of this, as my instinct tells me, is because of the progress we were making towards regional integration for Israel and regional integration overall. And we can't leave that work behind.
French President Emmanuel Macron is promoting, with little success so far, for the creation of an international coalition to fight the armed Palestinian group Hamas. He pitched the idea during a 2-day trip to the Middle East that started in Israel. Leaders he met with in Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, and Egypt didn't publicly address the issue. The first response to the devastating Israel-Hamas war is the fight against terrorism, Macron said Wednesday after his meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He said, "The right response is to cooperate to draw lessons from the international coalition against the Islamic State group that intervened in Iraq and Syria." Macron first proposed the idea Tuesday after his meeting with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, mentioning a regional and international coalition against Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip. But Netanyahu didn't specifically comment on the proposal. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry said Thursday that more than 7,000 Palestinians have been killed so far, more than 3 times the number of Palestinians killed in the 6-week-long Gaza war in 2014. In the occupied West Bank, more than 100 Palestinians have been killed in violence and Israeli raids following Hamas's surprise rampage on October 7 in southern Israel. The fighting has killed more than 1,400 people in Israel, according to Israeli officials, mostly civilians who died in the initial Hamas attack. Israel's military has raised the number of remaining hostages in Gaza to 222 people, including foreigners believed captured by Hamas during the incursion. 4 hostages have been released so far. US and other officials fear the fighting could spill over into a wider regional conflict.